Joining us today are both Wayne Vaughan and Shawn Wilkinson, the authors of Tyrion, and the founder of Storage and joint author of the new Chainpoint white paper. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
Happy to be here.
You guys, Shawn, you've been on the show before. You've talked about storage, but today we're going to talk about this new Chainpoint white paper that you've produced. Shawn, why don't you go ahead and get us started about, what is Chainpoint?
Sure. So it all came about as I was working on storage, and as maybe some of your audience knows, storage is a decentralized cloud platform. It allows people to buy and sell their storage space completely unencumbered by trusting a third party. So one of the problems with that is that we have to audit the data constantly. If you're storing someone else's data, we have to make sure that you're not doing anything funny with that data. And so you need to be able to prove to other people that you're correctly doing that. And so you might do a proof, but they might not be around to check that proof. They could turn their computer off, or they could do any number of things that might not get to them. So you have to prove to them that you've done that challenge, you've done that audit, you're storing the data at that particular point in time. And the only way to do that is through the Bitcoin blockchain. So essentially use some sort of notarization through the Bitcoin blockchain. But unfortunately, that costs about 3 cents. So if I was to do 1,000 audits, that would cost a lot of money. So instead, what I found out is that you can just collate a bunch of these things together and do them as one transaction, and then essentially you get a receipt like you would get in a store, and you can prove that, hey, my transaction right here is part of that larger transaction. And so therefore, in our system, we can do audits for thousands or millions of files for a very small amount of money, or expanding that outside of storage. If you just want to notarize any data in the Bitcoin blockchain, you can use this process where you store it through the system, get a receipt, and you can prove that your document's inserted in the Bitcoin blockchain. But you work with a bunch of other people, so everyone inserts their transaction at once, and so you only have to pay one fee instead of many thousand, many million. So that kind of evolved into a more general standard that's useful outside of storage, and that is Chainpoint.
Okay, so Wayne, it sounds like Chainpoint is sort of a cost-saving measure, and you're the creator of the Tyrion project. What is Tyrion, and how does it relate to Chainpoint?
Sure. So Tyrion's a cloud application that allows you to collect data and record it in the Bitcoin blockchain. And so think of it as a cloud database that notarizes every record in the blockchain. And a few months ago, I knew that Shawn was working on this other project called HashServe, which he was generating these Merkle proofs that he was just talking about. And I approached him with the idea that said, look, we have this database that we're building right now, and we want to be able to record all this in the blockchain, but we need to be able to pass this information on to other systems and have them be able to verify that data. So what if we take what you're doing and we evolve it to create a blockchain receipt standard called Chainpoint that allows us to notarize massive amounts of records into the blockchain with a single transaction, and then be able to take that blockchain receipt and pass it on to other systems. And so we worked together, and Shawn's got an implementation of Chainpoint inside storage, and we've built a separate implementation for inside Tyrion in C#.
That's awesome. This sounds very interesting, and I actually have a few different questions, but so I'm kind of figuring out right now where I want to start at. The first thing I want to say is, Shawn, welcome to being the first person to appear on the show twice besides us hosts. You are the first second-timer, so congratulations. We'll send you the award in the mail. And I think I'm going to go to both of you on this, so I'd love a response from both of you individually. We'll start with Shawn, if you don't mind. What are some use cases? Let's say that I was explaining this to a friend or someone interested in your project, and they really wanted to know, okay, give me a real-world use case for this. And I know there was plenty with storage. You came up with a ton, so I know you're going to have some awesome answers. And continue and let us know exactly how you can use this.
Sure. So if you're familiar with projects like Manuel Arizal's Proof of Existence, or something like Factum, pretty much 99% of those overlap. In terms of just a general audience, document notarization, let's say you make any kind of document and you want to prove that, let's say, this insurance document that you signed is the way you signed at this point in time. You could pipe it through Tyrion or through some kind of application through this Chainpoint standard, and that would notarize it in the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, before, if you did that, that would cost you 3 cents. Now this can be, you know, 1/1000th of a penny. So anything where data notarization is needed, you're thinking about your own documents, your own financial documents that you want to prove that this was in the state as I got it, financial records, banking records, anything where you have some important data that you want to notarize or prove that it's in the state it is as you got it for any kind of purposes. So in storage, it's proving that I've done my audits correctly. For a financial use case, it might be that we got this transaction at this point in time in this state. And so if there's any question of that down the line, you have an irrefutable proof through that receipt that was how you got it. I mean, think of it almost like, again, I keep alluding to this receipt analogy, just a receipt at a store. So if you buy something and you get a receipt and then, you know, there's pickles on your burger when you ask for no pickles and it's on the receipt, then you can say, hey, you know, here I have that proof that I asked for no pickles and there's pickles on my burger. So it functions in that way. There's many use cases, mainly dealing with any kind of document that you want to notarize.
So Tony, we're doing something a little bit different. We have some use cases that are slightly different than what Shawn had just talked about. So where Shawn's answers were more in the document realm, we're really talking about data. Think of rows in an Excel spreadsheet. And so some of the things that we're doing, we've talked with some Bitcoin exchanges who are interested in logging all of their trade data in the blockchain, and that helps with compliance issues. In fact, if the chief compliance officer at pretty much any company would be interested in using this technology to collect and notarize data, it really helps take away some of the compliance risk and creates a cryptographically auditable system, which doesn't really exist right now. One of the things that we are doing, we have been hired by the state of Connecticut. Tyrion is going to be doing the first government survey whose results are going to be notarized in the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, it's just a survey of the top 200 tech companies in Connecticut, so it's not controversial information. But there are lots of other scenarios where surveys happen and political decisions for things like zoning and large spending projects and other things are based on or justified by the results of that survey. So the citizens don't get a chance to actually vote. They just do this survey and they publish the information. Providing transparency is one thing, but being able to provide a level of verification along with transparency is another thing. So that's one of the types of use cases that we're using. But you can think of anybody who's collecting data that they want to be able to verify it later on. If they're doing corporate reporting, like Shawn had mentioned, banking records. A lot of people in the fintech world have expressed interest in what we're doing. So we're ramping up for a launch sometime this week. We're going to go live. We're going to start letting other people use the system towards the end of the week, and we have a plan to go live on Monday.
That's extremely exciting, Wayne. Let me follow up with you on that. And it sounds like since you have this contract with, you said it was the state of Connecticut, yes. What exactly is your long-term business plan in this sense? So the blockchain provides all this opportunity to sign data into this distributed ledger, and you guys have formalized a protocol around this. What is Tyrion's stake in that process?
So Tyrion's a cloud application. It's a software as a service. So instead of having to purchase some altcoin or try to do something with the blockchain technology, you can essentially just subscribe to a service, you send us data, and we automatically notarize all of the records that you send us into the Bitcoin blockchain. So there are uses for us in Well, the thing that's most interesting to me, to be honest, is the things that I can't predict. We're a platform, and we want other people to take this platform and to use it in order to build other software. So, for example, if somebody is working at a compliance consulting company, they oftentimes build in-house projects where they help their customers collect logs of data. I'm hoping that somebody will learn about Tyrion, and they'll come and they'll sign up for a free account and start experimenting with it, and start and bake that into their software solution. Same thing for companies that manage legal documents. We are also integrated with a tool called Zapier, which your listeners might be familiar with. It allows us to integrate with 400 applications. I'll give you a practical example of some of the things that we can do. Just the other day, we were playing around with a link between Zapier and Gmail and Tyrion, and we were notarizing every email sent and received from a Gmail account. And you could do that from an IMAP, any IMAP account, an Exchange account. You know, with things like Hillary Clinton's email server in the news and government transparency being top of mind with people, you can see how that might be interesting to some folks down the lane. I was in New York a couple days ago at the BitDevs meetup with CoinSetter, and I talked with them, and they expressed at least some interest in the idea, the concept of logging all of their trades and having that trade information. Banks, Deutsche Bank, USAA have also expressed an interest in what we're doing and have reached out to me. And as soon as we go live, they're going to be working with some of our, they're just going to be working with some free accounts that we're giving out to folks, and they're going to be able to interact with our system.
Yeah, I was trying to look for a prop here for my response. In terms of the standard, it's very, very, very cheap. So in terms of the things that Tyrion provides, it's kind of a level above the standard in terms of moving data around and really being a blockchain software as a service. In terms of the lower part of that, I want to make it pretty much free, because we can fit, you know, this is a little QB truck that has like a gigabyte of RAM. Uses very low power. I could support like millions of records on this and only pay a very little amount of money. So we really don't even, on the Chainpoint portion, have to charge that much. It can be necessarily free for and support a lot of records and a lot of users. It's just somebody somewhere has to cover that little 3-cent cost. But you can fit in 1 million records in one Bitcoin transaction. So in terms of the business part of that, it's useful as another part of storage, but in terms of giving people access to the Bitcoin blockchain and notarizing data through the Bitcoin blockchain, we really want to kind of make it free.
Make it scalable. Something we haven't talked about yet, but I think that's important, is the subject of speed. You know, the Bitcoin network right now, we have this big block size debate and all these scalability issues. Bitcoin can only handle about 7 transactions per second. That's its sort of theoretical cap. If you want to notarize 1 million records, it could take you a long time, and it would cost you $30,000 if every transaction costs 3 cents. In our testing, we've done several million records, and we're able to take them in very quickly and able to notarize them in the blockchain, generate a blockchain receipt. And if we are doing that at 3 cents, if we do that for every 10 minutes, so we're synced up with the heartbeat of the Bitcoin blockchain, it'll cost us about $15,000, a little over $15,000 annually to run that. And so our scalability on all of our stuff is hosted in the Microsoft cloud. So if we get more traffic, we dynamically spin up more servers to enable us to handle the capacity. So that's a cost for us. But unless the transaction fees for Bitcoin scale up dramatically, our cost to actually record any almost unlimited number of records in the Bitcoin blockchain is going to be about $15,000 annually. And so, so we think that we've provided a really great user interface for developers. We have a REST API. We have a web forms endpoint that you can just, if you can make a contact form, you can send information into our system. And Zapier gives us the ability to collect information and use it with hundreds and hundreds of applications. As a practical example, let's say you wanted to build an insurance claims processing form on Aetna's website. And so you could build that form, post the data into Tyrion. Tyrion would generate a blockchain receipt which would notarize that, yes, this information was time-stamped and collected in this specific format. And keep in mind, we're talking about an insurance claim here, so it's important for them to get that information right and to be able to audit that and manage that information as it flows through their claims management process. But when we get that record, we could take the email address and send it into a subscriber list in MailChimp. We could take all of the contact information and post it to a custom URL that their systems have, and that might be able to look it up and see if that person is already in a customer database, and if not, they can add them as a record. We could create a Trello card. There's also, just from that one interaction, there's a bunch of other triggers that we can have downstream through Zapier. So it's really amazing what we can do, and I'm just very curious to see what people build with the platform. We have some customers. I have another business that I'm bringing some customers over into this world, but I'm really just curious to see what people build. Because one of the things that's interesting is that with Bitcoin, you can use it as money, you can use it to issue digital assets. I think identity is an application that's kind of like a digital asset, but it's unique enough where it probably deserves its own class. And notarization of data or verifying data is something that has existed, but it hasn't been scalable. Nobody's been able to make it so that you can submit more than 7 transactions per second and do it at a cost that's reasonable. That's one of the main goals of Factom. They're building an entire blockchain on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, and they have a lot of other things that they're doing. But we provide about 90% of the core utility of Factom without reliance on another blockchain or an altcoin. And it's an open protocol that anybody can build on. And you don't have to notarize data into the Bitcoin blockchain. You could put it into any blockchain. So you could actually store a blockchain receipt in a Factom entry, or in Litecoin.
Stored in Dogecoin as well.
Dogecoin, yeah, you could have, So what, Shawn and I, we went back and forth on this quite a bit, and we tried to take the protocol and just strip it down into the barest essentials possible. And then we wanted to put it out to the world without a lot of cruft on it and see what everybody would build with it and see how people would comment on it and help us mature it. And we actually got our first, Shawn, I don't know if you saw this, but we got our first comment in GitHub. Gubatron, Angel Leon, who's a well-known developer, he developed FrostWire. He made the first comments yesterday in the GitHub repository. So that's another milestone for us.
Going back on scale, just to put it in perspective, you have people like NASDAQ that really want to play around with Bitcoin technology, even integrate it with their trading platforms. And those are big players with a lot of money. And last time I checked, they were using something like colored coins. And so if you look at Bitcoin, again, hard limit at 7 transactions per second, and just looking up here now, NASDAQ does about 10,000 transactions per second. So you're talking about here compared to this. It's just not going to work. Whereas using something like this protocol, you'd be able to use the blockchain in all its goodness, but in a way that actually works and is actually scalable. 7 transaction is not going to cut it for anything dealing with NASDAQ, anything dealing with a large amount of money or a large amount of volume. So we need solutions like this that just use Bitcoin technology in creative ways to get the job done.
Whenever I hear about projects like yours, I smile and I sit here and I listen and I go, I can't wait till I listen to 5 years in the future, listening to these kind of things, and what a company would think of when they're hearing this now and thinking, people were working on this 5 years ago, we just weren't listening. So I want everyone that's listening to this to take note about what they're doing and how cool this is. And first and foremost, that was me demanding our audience to do something, or requesting heavily. Part 2, one of the things that always ends up being interesting are the anecdotes that come about explaining Bitcoin and decentralized tech to others. And when you were mentioning the state of Connecticut and the survey you had, personally, I've had very interesting conversations when it comes to state, local, even county governments I've spoken with in the past about blockchain tech in a variety of ways. How did that come about? So how did the opportunity arise where you're going to be able to actually participate in this survey? And what was their reaction to you? Did they give you the usual Bitcoin reaction, or was it something a little better?
So the Connecticut Technology Council has been a client of mine for 16 years. And so they came to us earlier this year and they said, hey, every year we help them collect information for a series of events, things like the Women of Innovation and the Connecticut's Tech Top 40 and the Innovation Summit, which is a startup-focused event. So we help them collect that information, and then we help them have a field of judges judge people for each one of those types of events. So they came to us recently and they said, you know what, we want to do this workforce survey of the top 200 tech companies in Connecticut, to ask them all these questions to see if we, as the state of Connecticut, can do more to retain people in the state of Connecticut. Now, 2 years ago, I went to the CEO of the CTC, and he and I sat down, and we talked about Bitcoin. And he had never, I guess he had sort of heard of Bitcoin before, but it was very foreign to him. And I mentioned that I think the rumors, maybe a few months later, the rumors of New York and the Bit license started to come up. And when I was a teenager here in Connecticut, there was no state income tax in Connecticut. And there was a state income tax in New York. So all of the companies located themselves just over the Connecticut state line so that they could avoid having to pay state income tax for their employees. I said, look, here's another opportunity for something like this with Bitcoin. These guys are going down this path. Let's try to do something that makes Connecticut a much more friendly state for Bitcoin and blockchain technology companies. Hasn't really gone anywhere. But they known about our development of Tyrion, and when the opportunity arose for us to do this survey using a new platform, not the old platform that we used, but something new, they said, sure, that's fine with us. You guys have always done everything for us and never let us down. So and we were able to set it up and test it, and it's going to go out probably tomorrow or the next day.
So that's amazingly exciting to hear just how quickly some institutions who we traditionally think of as being slow and monolithic are adopting this technology. That's really exciting.
One of the key things, Eric, just the key thing there is that they didn't have to think about it. It was completely transparent. So with Tyrion, we're just collecting information, and all of the technology stuff happens in the background. We didn't have to have the Bitcoin conversation. We didn't have to talk about blockchains or permissioned ledgers or any of the craziness around that. It was just a simple question in this case of being able to collect or manage data. And the fact that that information is verifiable through the Bitcoin blockchain is just an added bonus in this particular case to them. So if there are other people out there who are thinking about doing similar projects inside their business, one of the wonderful things about working with Tyrion and doing things through Chainpoint is that they don't have to learn about Bitcoin. They don't have to convince their boss. There's no KYC, or there's no money transmitter license issues, or none of that regulatory issues come into play. If you're just somebody who needs to collect or archive data and you want to be able to notarize that data in the Bitcoin blockchain, we're a fantastic solution.
That's really interesting. It sounds almost like for the entrepreneurs that we have listening, or even just developers who are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs, there's an interesting model that's emerging out of what Tyrion is doing, which is simply this idea of avoiding the whole Bitcoin blockchain conversation, forming an entity that uses the Bitcoin network as a tool within their toolbox, and then provides services on top of that. Would you say that that's a good way of sort of carrying sort of commerce forwards and using this new technology, or would you say that it is important at some point to describe the Bitcoin process to the potential clients that you might have?
I think it can be a little bit of both. I think most people don't really care about what technology, nobody, when somebody buys Salesforce.com, they don't care what servers, or if they're using SQL Server or Redis or Postgres or something like that under Salesforce.com. They just want the product and the value proposition. And so the fact that the Bitcoin technology stack has evolved far enough so that we can actually deliver applications that are uniquely using the capabilities of Bitcoin, but not forcing people to convert to a new religion is amazing. It's wonderful. I see Shawn smiling down there. It's true. I started off in the dot-com boom back in the mid-'90s, and a lot of people went down the path of trying to convince people how great the internet was and how they should do everything on the World Wide Web. And more often than not, people who just solved a business problem and provided a solution that was better, faster, cheaper, got people a new channel to access or interact with customers, those were the guys that won. Those were the people who had a real impact in the world. But to your point about, do you need to have a software stack that and have people in the development and IT side of the business who are aware of that and developing applications for that new model? Yeah, I think that's a big thing. So one of the things that we're doing in September, we're sponsoring the BlockStack Summit in New York City, which is a conference that's being organized by the folks behind OneName. And it's a day-long workshop for Bitcoin developers, and they're expecting about 200 to 300 people there. And those kinds of events and those kinds of I think the people who are going to be at that event are not just people in the Bitcoin sphere. These are people who are software developers, business managers, technical managers who are going to be coming to this kind of event. Getting them aware of new technology and getting them thinking about using Bitcoin and blockchain technology in new ways is absolutely essential for adoption, especially when it comes to doing things outside of payments. So that's why we're supporting that.
Okay, Shawn, we've got just a few minutes left, but I do want to make sure that we get some other technical questions out of the way. So it sounds like you're harping on the cost and limited scalability of the base Bitcoin protocol. As you know, I'm sure you've seen the numbers similarly. Despite the fact that the Bitcoin network is currently hard capped at about 7 transactions per second, theoretically, even lower if you actually run the numbers and look at average transaction size. Despite that, the elliptic curve cryptography is capable of doing over 20,000 or 30,000 signatures per second on regular consumer-grade hardware. Why isn't there something like batching? For example, in Bitcoin, we've heard a lot of things about the Lightning Network. We've heard a lot of things about payment channels, duplex payment channels. Those are being created to solve problems in the payment network that allow us to scale as fast as we're able to sign things. Why wouldn't a storage mechanism move in a similar direction?
So again, for the scalability portion, like you said, you can do signatures very quickly, but the hard part is kind of getting that consensus down, and also just the size of the data you have to move around the network. We're just getting into the block size debate again with 1 megabyte blocks, 8 megabyte blocks. It adds up, so it's a problem. But there's pretty clever, ingenious solutions like the Lightning Network that solve some of those things, micropayment channels that solve some of those things. And I think you have to think of something like Chainpoint in that vein. It's something similar to something like the Lightning Network, or probably more analogous to micropayment channels, where you're not making any core changes to the protocol. You're just using it in a different manner, adding some fancy computer science and math to get the job done, but still having the decentralized and distributed elements. In terms of storage, we're really not bottlenecked by those scaling issues, because the consensus is you to the person who's storing your file. So you don't really have to maintain a larger consensus network with many, many people. It's just the people who are actually storing your data. So we don't necessarily have the problems with scaling that Bitcoin does, just because it's simply a different problem.
Eric, can I chime in briefly about the scaling issue as well?
Yes, please.
So I was at BitDevs in New York City earlier this week, and Peter Todd gave a presentation about transaction fees and the scaling of Bitcoin. And there was a lot of debate in the room when we talked about all sorts of technical issues. But at the end of the day, what it really came down to was economic issues, or really political issues. The bottom line with all of the scaling issues, regardless of the technical issues, people don't like somebody else deciding that they have to be a loser. And no matter what technical decision you make in something this large, that that's going to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why I think even if we can solve some of the technical issues, that providing some sort of mechanism so that the Bitcoin protocol can evolve without centralized control, without having to pick winners and losers, is a real political challenge that's going to be a headwind no matter what the technical issues are.
Awesome. And before we wrap it up, and we want to give you in a second a chance to plug everything you're doing, URLs where everyone can find you, your Twitter handles, and all that. One of the questions that we all always like to ask, because I think one of the goals of us starting the show was getting interest in projects, any kind of project that really needs attention, and we want you guys to not only obviously give what you're working on attention. Are there any other interesting projects that you would really like to plug, or just anything that catches your eye that you're really into right now?
Shawn, go ahead.
Ethereum's doing quite well. I mean, that's an easy.
I would agree, but go ahead.
So, good job for them. Seeing the crazy stuff going around in the market, but exciting for them. So congrats to Vitalik and the whole team behind them. But I don't think I have any. I have to think about anything new. But that was pretty cool to see actually happen.
Yeah, it was great to see that go live. And I already mentioned the Blockstack Summit. There are some other initiatives that are around. MIT's got a project to get more women involved as Bitcoin developers, women and girls. And so that's something that I would support. But yeah, like Shawn said, the big news this week is Ethereum, and also storage. Not to pump up Shawn's ego, but there's some major milestones that are about to be crossed or shortly or being crossed.
Well, I was going to pump that next.
All right, so I'll settle down there. I won't steal your thunder.
I definitely agree with both of what you're saying. Storage, Ethereum. It's so cool to see so many different, vastly different projects and things people are working on. Shawn, I believe you were going to go into storage. I'm familiar with it, but tell our audience again how awesome it is.
Yeah, so decentralized storage. I think I made the intro earlier in the interview, but. Yeah, we're piping up test group B stuff. We have probably about 50 people running the clients right now. These are people that's in our Slack chat. And we're going to send out a blast to about 15,000 people, 16,000 people the next day or so, and see how that goes. So we got people farming away and lending out their capacity and just kind of doing everything live at this minute. Client's a little buggy, but it works and people are playing with it. So if you like to check that out, go to storage.io, storj.io. We have a mailing list there. You can jump into our Slack and get all the information, and all the instructions are on the mailing list as well. You can also get in contact with us at hello@storage.io.
Cool. And if you can, what are the links for Tyrion, for Chainpoint, all the relevant URLs we want to send our audience to?
Sure. So Tyrion, you can find us at Tierion.com. That's Tierion.com. And we'll be going live in just a couple of days. And so if you hit our homepage, just leave your email at the box at the top of the screen, and you'll get a notification when we go live. You can follow me on Twitter at Wayne Vaughan, Vaughan, and you can also see us on Twitter at Tyrion.
Okay, guys, thank you so much, both Wayne and Shawn, for joining us today, and we really appreciated the conversation and think that it was absolutely fascinating. We'll have all the links that we mentioned in the show in the links down below, so please make sure to follow the both of them and check out their projects.
Thanks for having me.